Lloyd is Ruby's assistant. His lover is also a genius alchemist with such incredibly high standards that you'll never get a reply from her. Lloyd looked at the phantom flower pot which he had risked his life to obtain, now lying neglected in the trash can. Meanwhile, Ruby was beloved throughout the kingdom for her miraculous remedies and medicines. But to Lloyd, she was nothing more than a devil in disguise as an angel. Ruby strictly adheres to the highest standards in her alchemy laboratory. Anything that fails to meet the requirements is immediately and mercilessly discarded. The process of alchemy requires an alchemist to create potions and an assistant responsible for sourcing the ingredients. However, Ruby's impressive success rate consistently reaches 100%. Lloyd's success rate in gathering ingredients was a mere 40%, while the average for his assistants was 90%. Ruby blamed Lloyd for causing the work to be delayed. He bowed his head in shame and apologized, but that did nothing to appease her anger. Ruby angrily threw things around the room, shouting that if Lloyd had time to cry and complain, then he also had time to go find ingredients. Lloyd being perceived as an incompetent assistant also damaged her reputation. Lloyd was fed up with being thrown things at him, and he endured the ridicule of the villagers. He couldn't take it anymore. Finally, Lloyd announced that he would be stepping down from his role as Ruby's assistant. But Ruby's reaction was one of smug satisfaction. She believed he was just bluffing and asked him to return before dark. Determination. Lloyd summoned the box of objects, and he started packing his things. For him, it doesn't matter where he goes as long as it's not here. While Lloyd was sorting things out, Ruby threw something into his box. It was a piece of paper which she explained was a note asking him to bring back Earl Grey tea. That only added fuel to the fire. Lloyd sat alone by the fountain in the town square, his mind filled with uncertainty about where he would go next. Having become accustomed to doing whatever Ruby asked, he still bought the Earl Grey tea package she requested. Looking up at the sky, Lloyd saw a dragon flying high. The dragon is free from all rules and constraints. He wished he could be like that dragon. He wants to start his life over. Lloyd boarded a horse-drawn carriage heading to a remote town where no one knew who he was. In the car, he was accompanied by a couple, Mars and Lara. People were flirting with each other right in front of him. They annoyed him so much he wanted to throw stones at them, not out of jealousy, but because of their insensitivity. However, Lloyd didn't really mind. He just wished they remembered that he was sitting there too. Watching them interact, he involuntarily thought about his relationship with Ruby and realized the difference. Ruby used to be a very different girl. Although he still retains his lively and somewhat impulsive personality, she genuinely cared about others and always strived tirelessly. She once dreamed of becoming the kingdom's top alchemist, and she took Lloyd along with her on the path to achieving that dream. They were once passionate about pursuing their own careers, paying no attention to anything else. Eventually, their alchemy workshop gained recognition, and Ruby received the title Alchemia Steel. But soon after, Ruby's personality changed, transforming her into the person Lloyd, and perhaps the whole world, despises today. Suddenly, the carriage came to an abrupt stop, interrupting Mars and Lara's flirtatious exchange. Hearing the coachman shouting, Lloyd wondered if they had encountered a monster. Lyra, already annoyed by Lloyd's constant muttering to himself, was further irritated when he suddenly spoke up. Mars quickly apologized on her behalf. Lyra climbed outside to see what was happening, then called Mars down to follow her. They both witnessed a terrifying giant worm appear. Lyra was terrified, but Mars stepped forward to reassure her and promised to protect her. Lloyd couldn't help but feel jealous of the sweet display of affection between the two of them. He told Mars that he had fought these giant worms before. Mars happily accepted any advice he offered. Lloyd explained that the worm's weak point was its head, and a single well-aimed blow would be enough to take it down. But the problem was its head was way too high up. Mars asked Lloyd how to reach the worm's weak point. Lloyd simply told him to cheer himself up. This completely changed Lyra's impression of Lloyd. She felt they couldn't rely on him at all. The giant worm hissed and lunged to attack. As Mars and Lyra prepared to defend themselves, Lloyd pulled them out of the line of attack. Then he cast a powerful explosive spell directly at the worm's head. The results were astonishing. The worm not only lost its head, but its entire body had disintegrated into tiny pieces. Mars breathed a sigh of relief and expressed gratitude for Lloyd being there. But Lara wouldn't let things end so simply. Confused, she asked why Mars didn't find Lloyd's actions strange. With such power, it was clear that Lloyd was far beyond the average person, to the point where she suspected he had cheated somehow. However, after calming down, Lyra admitted that she was genuinely surprised. If Mars thought this was obvious, then she agreed, especially since she herself was a sorceress wielding a scepter. Finally, Lyra bowed her head and begged Lloyd to accept her as his apprentice. Lloyd had never been called master before because he had always lived in Ruby's shadow. For the first time in his life, he considered taking on a student, but only if she could answer his questions. Lara thanked Lloyd and apologized for calling him a weird loner earlier. Lloyd felt pleased with his new role, feeling appreciated for the first time. Lara, curious, asked Lloyd who he really was, but he wondered if Lara and Mars would still accept him if they knew the truth. He asked them if they knew Ruby. Of course, Lara knew Ruby well. She was a genius alchemist beloved by the entire kingdom. Lloyd cleared his throat, then asked if Lyra knew the name of Ruby's courageous assistant. Lyra's tone changed instantly. She recounted how she knew about Lloyd, Ruby's incompetent assistant and useless mage, blamed for all her failures. Lara even hoped he would die soon. She asked Lloyd why he brought it up. Lloyd calmly replied that he was the useless assistant she wanted to get rid of. Lara was so shocked that she fainted. White foam oozed from the corners of her mouth. Lloyd told his companions about his plans to start a new life in the city of Manurva. Despite often criticizing Lloyd harshly, Ruby actually respected his magical abilities and once advised him to be more confident in himself. Mars and Lyra also promised to support him in any way they could. They even jokingly suggested that Lloyd should change his style, try a mohawk haircut, and wear fur clothing. 3 weeks had passed since Lloyd left the capital, and now he had arrived in Manurva, known as the City of Life. He hoped that here he could enjoy a slower pace of life, far away from the frantic workdays under Ruby's supervision. But reality turned out differently than he had hoped. As soon as Lloyd entered Manurva, he was attacked by another mage. Hours after arriving, he was impressed by the hustle and bustle and prosperity of the city, despite its distance from the capital. Mars and Lyra explained that Manurva's economy depends heavily on explorers. They were explorers themselves, and Lyra was very excited to invite Lloyd to join their group. Although Lloyd wasn't interested in being an explorer, Lyra thought differently. She felt that his previous experience as a sorcerer's assistant was very similar to the work of an explorer. Lyra urgently asked Lloyd to think more about her offer. During lunch, Mars and Lyra changed into formal attire, ready to help Lloyd adjust to his new life in the city. Lloyd had almost forgotten what it felt like to have someone genuinely support him, and now he felt it from Mars and Lyra. However, Lyra was astonished by Lloyd's lunch choice, so much so that she joked it reminded her of wartime when German planes were still flying overhead. She suggested Lloyd try milk tea, a very popular drink at the time, but Mars dismissed the idea and advised her to eat properly instead. Lyra gave Lloyd a piece of paper and told him to write down the job he wanted to do. But when he picked up a pen, Lloyd was haunted by the image of little Ruby making him do endless chores. Mars observed and remarked that Lloyd had probably given up his dreams just to serve Ruby. Lyra advised him to try writing down things he had never thought about before. Lloyd tried to write down a few ideas, but his complicated circumstances made making a decision difficult. Lyra quipped that he was too picky for someone who didn't have many options. Finally, Lyra suggested Lloyd try working at a tool shop. This job would allow him to use magic without fighting or enduring sweat and blood. Lloyd initially thought it was a good idea, but then he wondered what would happen if Ruby visited his shop. And so everything went back to square one. Lyra asked Lloyd what he thought about becoming a carpenter, but he refused for the familiar reason. If Ruby finds him, she'll definitely nag him and make him rebuild everything from scratch. Mars took Lloyd's hand and invited him to become an adventurer, along with him and Lyra. Lyra believes it would be a shame if Lloyd couldn't utilize his talents simply because he was afraid of encountering Ruby again. She emphasized that the decision of whether or not to get back together rested entirely with him. Mars and Lyra also pledged that they were trustworthy individuals and that Lloyd could rely on them for support. Lloyd was touched by the words of encouragement. Lloyd sincerely thanked both of them and decided to give it a try. From now on, he's no longer the crybaby afraid of Ruby. He will become an explorer. Lloyd happily walked down the street with Mars and Lyra, feeling as if a huge weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Along the way, they come across a giant bronze statue of a saint from the Emerald Church. Lyra casually calls the saint an old woman. Lloyd quickly reminded them that calling the saint that could result in immediate execution. Lloyd then left alone to hone his skills, promising to meet Mars and Lyra again at the Explorers Guild. The next day, Mars was glad Lloyd was feeling better, but Lyra was somewhat disgusted by his new personality. A short while later, Lloyd encountered 2 thugs who were trying to rob him. One of them was holding a cup of bubble tea. Suddenly, an ice explosion struck nearby. This made Lloyd realize it was a very powerful spell. The magician appeared, making her a new target for the robbers. Lloyd feared that the mage might cause further harm. Lloyd decided to intervene, and he personally subdued the thugs. After dealing with the robbers, Lloyd advised the mage not to use such powerful magic in confined spaces. He noticed that she appeared to be a nun, but she used powerful offensive magic. The mage noticed the cut on Lloyd's cheek and offered to heal him. However, this meant her face was only inches away from his. Lloyd had never been so close to a girl's face. Not even Ruby had. The girl introduced herself as Iris. And she explained that she had only arrived in the city yesterday. Iris was delighted to meet a newcomer like herself. And when she asked Lloyd what he did for a living, he shyly replied that he was an explorer. Iris was impressed, but she also revealed that she is currently unemployed. When Lloyd asked Iris what she was doing in Manurva, she replied that she was there because she really wanted to try the famous bubble tea. Lloyd offered to take Iris to get some bubble tea later. And when the clock struck midnight, Iris said she had to leave to go back and see her maid. Finally, Lloyd remarked that she looked like a princess, and jokingly called her princess. Surprisingly, Iris responded with the same energy, and she asked if he was a prince kind enough to take her home. Meanwhile, Mars and Lara had been watching Lloyd all evening. When Lara saw him interacting with Iris, she quickly conjured up a fictional story in her head. Mars worried that she had read too many X-reader type stories. Lyra angrily told him not to disturb her while she was busy writing her story and threatened to shoot an arrow in Mars' head to prove that she wasn't joking. She took her bow and shot through the window of the Explorers Guild. Mars asked her in surprise what she was doing, but Lara seemed completely lost in her own fantasy world. Mars could only sigh and wish Lloyd good luck. He'd need it. Lloyd escorted Iris back to the hotel because she was genuinely lost. When they happened to pass by the Explorers Guild, Lloyd suggested they go inside to ask for directions. But the explorers were not in a generous mood, and immediately they demanded to know who had shot the arrow that damaged the saint's painting. One of them recognized Lloyd as Ruby's useless magical assistant and decided it must be him. Although this means Lloyd's secret has been revealed, he is now facing another problem. Everyone in the room wanted to kill him. Lloyd summoned constricting vines to repel the attackers. Unfortunately, the vines ended up in places they shouldn't have. A voice complained about the noise. Iris was surprised when she recognized the voice as that of Isolde Knight, her former bodyguard. Isolde was also surprised to see Iris, the saint of Holy Roland. Isolde and the others all knelt before Iris and apologized for treating her badly. Iris didn't mind because no one could recognize her since she always wore a mask. One of them asked what was so special about the saint, especially a saint who came from another country. Another person spoke up to explain to their teammate that the maiden saint possesses a special ability called the power of holy magic. This power can revitalize vast lands and ensure they remain green and fertile. On the other hand, lands without saints are often ravaged by monsters. Something is not right. Each country has only one saint at a time, but Iris had previously said that she was unemployed. Isolde demoted all the explorers. Those who dared lay a hand on her were demoted to the lowest rank as punishment. But Iris revealed shocking news. She was no longer a saint. She asked Isolde not to punish anyone, and comforted her by saying that a new saint had taken her place. Lloyd worried that this sudden news might cause her ardent followers to revolt. But contrary to his fears, they were moved by Iris's kindness. They were so touched that they shed tears. Isolde also promised not to punish anyone else. Once the crisis was resolved and with new guidance in hand, Lloyd led Iris back to her hotel. He was really glad she was there to sort things out. However, he apologized to her for confusing her in the first place. Iris told Lloyd not to worry about it. They were both lost and didn't know where to go tonight, but she really enjoyed the time they spent together. Iris had been a saint her whole life, and Lloyd understood the feeling of loneliness, of having nowhere to belong. Iris found Lloyd to be a little rigid, so she decided to tease him a little by continuing the prince and princess game they had been playing earlier. Lloyd's eyes scanned the city, searching for something to keep the game going, and he saw the clock tower. Perfect! Lloyd picked Iris up, and thanks to magic that enhanced his physical abilities, he carried her to the top of the tower. From here, Lloyd gives Iris a magnificent view of Manurva. He gently placed Iris down on the roof. Make sure she doesn't slip, fall, and cause the story to end abruptly. Lloyd told Iris that the entire city was illuminated by magical stones, stones forged by an old jeweler named Hecate. Lloyd often passed through Manurva from afar on his missions and greatly admired its beauty. Iris thanked Lloyd for showing her such a beautiful sight. But the show wasn't over yet. Lloyd told her to watch closely as dawn broke and the sun rose over the mountain. Lloyd showed her how the magical stones blended with the morning light. Lloyd explained that he only knew the life of a sorcerer's assistant and had fled to Manurva after getting fed up with being treated like trash. However, he could still point out a breathtaking view to Iris for a special friend he had met just hours earlier. Iris also wants to find her place in this world. Iris grabbed Lloyd's hand, which Lloyd found unbearable. He fainted briefly and nearly fell from the roof. Iris had to use all her strength to lift his entire body. And she threw him over her shoulder. Lloyd muttered that he just wanted to show off a little to her, and Iris laughed in response. He asked her what Iris's life would be like in the future, and she replied that she wanted to live the rest of her life relaxing with a new friend. Lyra saw the results of her hard work and proudly told Mars that everything had been a success. Unfortunately, Isolde has captured him and will soon capture Lara. Meanwhile, in Ruby's lab, an auditor downgraded her from 2B for failing to fulfill a request that had been made last week. Ruby attempted to appeal to the auditors. But nothing can change that. The lab's ranking is what makes it trustworthy, and with recent incidents, her reputation will be affected. 3 weeks had passed since Lloyd left, leaving Ruby with little help. She tried to ask for help from other assistants, but they refused her request. She couldn't believe they couldn't do what Lloyd had done, and claimed they were simply jealous of his success. She blames Lloyd's departure for her current troubles, but her resolve remained unwavering. She would become a world-class alchemist like Hecate, whether with Lloyd's help or not. Lloyd joins the Adventurers Guild to start a new life with Mars and Lara. He wonders where they are, and Isolde pulled them in. Isolde explained that their current condition was due to an incident that occurred this morning. Isolde had heard of Lloyd and was curious to know why he had come to Manurva just a few hours earlier. Mars and Lara were taken into the interrogation room for questioning. Isolde, unwilling to fight, requested a mage to cast a silencing spell on Lara. Isolde demanded to know why they attacked the Adventurers Guild and asked if they were terrorists or fanatics. Lara would die of embarrassment if Mars told them it was because she wanted to be the Cupid of love. Mars tried to convey through wordplay that they had been attacked by robbers and an arrow was flying around wildly. Mars seemed to understand, but in reality he understood nothing at all, and he told Isolde that Lara wanted to become Cupid, the god of love. Mars tells Isolde all about the romantic novel that Lara is so fascinated with. This is not what Lara wanted him to do at all. This scene is quite embarrassing. Before Mars could say anything more to embarrass her, Lara slapped him on the head. Returning to the current situation, ultimately Isolde decided to ignore this minor incident, as it seemed too silly to bother with. However, Isolde still had his suspicions about Lloyd. He was able to easily defeat a Class A traveler, knew 2 fools, and had some kind of connection with Iris. If he intended to harm Manurva, Isolde felt it was her duty to drive him away. Mars loudly asked Lloyd if he had become a traveler yet. This increased Isolde's curiosity. She dragged Lloyd outside to take a test at the guild, in which he would have to touch a challenge stone, a magical device that measures the power of the person who touches it. Each guild possesses such a stone. When Lloyd learned that this device also had the potential to demonstrate career potential, he saw this as an opportunity to find out what kind of work he was truly suited for in life. However, Isolde hoped that the stone would help her see something. Eventually, Lloyd's true nature would be revealed. They arrived at the Temple of Wind, where the Stone of Trial was kept on the highest level of the tower. As they climbed the steps, Lloyd asked Isolde if she had ever touched the challenge stone, but she coldly replied that it was none of his business. Suddenly, Lloyd sensed the presence of a monster below and acted immediately. A group of monsters is attacking a group of helpless travelers. Mars and Lara drew their weapons, because although they were rather clumsy, they were still capable of fighting. A spider slithered down onto Lyra's head, leaving her helpless. Isolde drew her weapon and annihilated the horde of monsters with a single magical wind attack, demonstrating the guild's core role, eliminating monsters wherever they appeared. A giant spider attacks from above, but Lloyd avoided it by using a physical enhancement spell. He immediately counterattacked with a lightning strike. This impressed Isolde greatly. She began to wonder if Lloyd's reputation as a useless assistant was just a rumor. To better understand his abilities, Isolde asked him what he would do if he encountered a monster stronger than himself. Lloyd replied that he would flee, but only after using 16 consecutive explosive spells to attack it. Lloyd's answer was so bizarre that Isolde considered him an even greater enigma than ever before. They took a short break while climbing the tower, while Lara prepared tea for them. Isolde cooked them an English breakfast. Their second breakfast arrived later. Although Isolde has a terrifying appearance and looks like he would kill someone with his SNU uniform, creating a very strict atmosphere, Lloyd, Lara, and Mars were still treated to a wonderful meal. This is understandable since Isolde is the daughter of Lord Manurva, which makes her a noblewoman. When Lloyd tried to ask her about the outcome of the stone's challenge, Isolde ignored the question and told them to keep moving. On the way up, Lyra and Lloyd talked about Isolde. They seemed to be trying to hide her results. However, Lloyd remarked that everyone has the right to keep a few secrets. Before reaching the summit, Lara asked Lloyd for a small favor. Finally, their group of 4 reached the top floor of the Temple of Wind. Isolde demonstrates the simple use of the trial stone. The stone's function is to answer questions when you place your hand on it. Lara asked about Isolde's highest-ranking career, and the trial stone began listing her top 3 occupations, while Isolde desperately tried to ask it to stop. Her third profession was that of a warrior, her second was that of a holy knight, and at her head is the baker. The room fell silent and became extremely awkward. Isolde was almost completely destroyed. Lloyd tried to ease the awkward atmosphere by saying that he really liked sweets. Suddenly, a stone griffin disguised as a statue attacked. It swung its claws toward Isolde, but she managed to dodge the blow just in time. Unfortunately, the griffin swallowed the trial stone, and it ran away. Lloyd hadn't even had a chance to touch the stone yet. Lloyd chased after the griffin. He created a lightning bolt in an attempt to bring it down, but the monster dodged it. Lloyd amplified the power of his attacks, inflicting significant damage on the tower. Mars wondered why such a powerful monster would appear in a beginner's dungeon, but his question could wait. Isolde's top priority is to defeat the monster before it can harm anyone else. They approached a large hall connected to several different corridors. Mars loudly asked about Isolde's favorite food, and the voice of the test stone echoed from the end of the corridor, answering that it was pancakes. They ran down the corridor, using the stone's voice as a guide. Because the stone will not answer questions that have already been asked, Isolde told them not to hesitate, to ask anything they wanted while they pursued the griffin. During this process, they discovered some interesting information about Isolde. Her favorite animal is the rabbit, and her favorite book is a romance novel. When Lara learned that she had a friend who shared her love of romance novels, she plunged into a deep, dark rabbit hole, becoming engrossed in thoughts of romantic stories. Lloyd realized that at their current speed, they wouldn't be able to catch up with the griffin, so he used a physical enhancement spell to increase his movement speed. The spell was so powerful that Isolde could hardly believe it was a low-level spell. Thanks to this speed, they were hurtling towards the edge of the cliff without being able to control themselves. Mars sacrificed his life to push Lara out of the way, and they eventually lost the source of their most valuable yet ultimately useless questions. Meanwhile, the members of the Stranger Guild discussed Lloyd joining them, and they joked that he must be in a terrible state because Isolde had a reputation as a very strict inspector. A griffon suddenly burst into the room, while the trial stone reveals that Isolde's favorite pajamas feature a rabbit and moon pattern. Lloyd, Isolde, and Lara soon caught up with the monster, and Isolde ordered the remaining new recruits in the area to evacuate while they dealt with the griffin. Lloyd attacked the monster with a barrage of water bullets, but Griffin proved to be a difficult creature to hit. Nevertheless, he was determined to retrieve the challenge stone. Isolde wondered why Lloyd was so obsessed with the trial stone. Although she could perceive him as a rather talented mage and warrior, she mistakenly believed that he had somehow stolen Iris's powers, and he had his sights set on the challenge stone from the beginning. Lara's face flushed with anger. Using what Lloyd had taught her earlier, Lara remained silent and concealed her presence. This made her undetectable by conventional methods. She stealthily approached the griffin from behind. She used the oldest magic known to humankind, headbutting. The griffin spat out the trial stone, and Lloyd rushed toward it. Isolde competed with him for it, but Lloyd was the more desperate one, and he got the stone first. Lara may also have died after falling into the rubble. Lloyd asked the challenge stone about his profession, but the stone answered with words he never expected. He was simply Ruby's servant forever. Lloyd's heart nearly stopped, and he recalled the time Ruby had burned his alchemy notes while he was trying to learn them. It was too much for Lloyd, and he broke down in tears. He didn't want to do anything Ruby told him to do anymore. He wants to change his life, but it seems fate is working against him. Isolde looked at him with pity. Lyra lifted her head off the ground and warned Lloyd that the Griffon had returned, this time in a rage. Isolde blocked Griffin's attack with his sword, and she encouraged Lloyd not to pay attention to the words of the test stone. Although she may have made others smile with her baking, she is proud of her choice to become a hunter. She says her choice made sense. Isolde forced the Griffin to retreat, and she asked Lloyd for help, to attack it with all her might. Isolde drove the Griffin out of the temple with a powerful gust of wind magic. This gives Lloyd an opportunity to attack the monster with his most powerful spell, Thunderstorm. The Griffin was defeated, and they returned the trial stone to its rightful place. Isolde admitted that she had thought Lloyd had come to Manurva with some nefarious plan, and she apologized to him. She told Lloyd that he could change things in this town and that he could control his own destiny. Isolde asked the challenge stone about Lloyd's favorite food, and she promised to cook him a pot of soup to celebrate passing the hunter's test. Lloyd and Isolde descended from the temple, and they reunited with Mars and Lyra, who had managed to survive with only minor injuries. Isolde congratulated them all on their good work. Now they were able to receive assignments from the Hunters Guild every week. Lara asked if they should take on a mission tomorrow, but Isolde cleared her throat naturally and said that Sunday was her day off, as she was the leader of the Hunters Guild. Lloyd, Mars, and Lara all realized that she really wanted to be invited to participate. As Lloyd watched his new friends interact, he felt like he would be able to live a good life in Manurva. A few days later at an inn in Manurva, Nero, a chef, prepares a gourmet breakfast for Iris, but only to have the maid Saphiria announce that Iris had gone to practice magic early. Nero felt despair. Making breakfast for Iris was one of the few joys in his life, and this was heartbreaking. Saphiria observed that Iris had changed since arriving in Manurva, and she wondered if it was due to the influence of that sorcerer. Nero stood up and asked her to tell him more about the sorcerer. She told him the full story of how Iris met Lloyd. Nero had never heard this story until now. Saphiria points out that Nero never asked, and Nero calls her a fraud. After obtaining an accurate description of Lloyd's appearance, Nero vowed to meet him, but not for good reasons. A week ago, Lloyd and his group won and returned to the Hunters Guild to claim their reward. The receptionist, curious, asked them how they managed to complete the task so quickly. Lara replied that they were simply elite hunters. Isolde walked in, carrying a huge cake. Isolde's subordinates discovered that she loved baking, so now they wanted to taste her cakes. She told Lloyd that he should complete a mission alone sometimes because she thought he was being overly protective of Mars and Lyra. Lloyd didn't mind, as this comfortable lifestyle was what he had wanted from the start. Isolde shook her head. She only hoped that he could find the time to do things for himself. The following day, Lloyd fought some goblins in Vid's Great Forest. The mission to exterminate the goblins is expected to be completed within a week, but Lloyd finished it in just one day. He wanted to try to complete 3 tasks that day. But then he realized he was doing the opposite of the slow-paced lifestyle he wanted. A small image of Ruby mocks him, saying that Lloyd doesn't even know what he wants to do, and that he would be better off getting back together with her. Lloyd refused to listen to the voices in his head, and decided to do something of his own choosing. Like he personally cooks his favorite dish. Lloyd prepared his favorite dish, a pot-au-feu, a meal often served at the orphanage where he grew up. Ruby finds pot-au-feu disgusting and would prefer curry. Suddenly, Lloyd heard a splashing sound coming from the nearby river. He rushed to the scene, and he rescued Iris, pulling her ashore. Iris explained that she was practicing magic near the river in Manurva, but she failed and was swept downstream by the river. Iris worried that if she didn't return to see her servants soon, they would become anxious. Lloyd offered to take her back to Manurva once her clothes were dry, and while they waited, he offered her something to eat first. Lloyd opened the lid of the pot. He was horrified to realize that he had accidentally cooked curry instead of the pot-au-feu he intended to make. He couldn't bring himself to cook his favorite dish. Iris noticed he was worried about it, so she tried the sauce and praised the dish as very delicious. She complimented Lloyd's cooking skills, which lifted his spirits somewhat. Lloyd told her that curry was actually Ruby's favorite food. Although they had a less than smooth past, he still respected her very much. Iris was a talented alchemist, but she was also a wicked person. She was ambitious and outspoken, while Lloyd was passive and simply followed instructions. However, Iris didn't think this was entirely a bad thing. The fact that Lloyd had helped Ruby, and that someone being able to help another person, was wonderful. Lloyd was touched by Iris's comforting words and thought that living a slow-paced life with her would be wonderful. Lloyd thought all his problems would automatically disappear if he just stayed away from Ruby. But he realized that unless he changed himself, nothing would change. Iris understood his thoughts. The reason she was no longer a saint was because she hadn't changed. The conversation gradually faded away, and Lloyd realized that he actually knew very little about Iris. They were unaware. Nero had been watching them from afar, angry that Lloyd was feeding Iris something. Finally, Iris told Lloyd everything about the maids Saphiria and Nero. Lloyd was eager to hear more about them. But at that moment, Tiruru, Iris's maid and butler, joined them. Tiruru thanked Lloyd for taking care of her young mistress. She arrived to deliver some of Saphiria's belongings, but found she wasn't there. Iris explained that they had separated. Tiruru quickly realized that Iris had been secretly practicing advanced magic. Iris apologized but explained that it would be better to start learning now, rather than waiting until later. Tiruru scolded her for her careless actions. Lloyd offered to teach Iris more magic. Tiruru agreed, because it makes more sense to have a professional teach Iris. However, if she feels any danger, Tiruru vowed to end the lesson immediately. Nero watched Lloyd and the others head downstream. When he arrived at their campsite, he found only a table and some cooking utensils. He was almost furious, and he asked Saphiria for help. But then they discovered she was eating from the curry pot that Lloyd had cooked, explaining that she was checking to see if it was poisoned. She also forgot to bring the holy sword, but offered to use the turnip that Nero had asked her to fetch. Nero didn't want it, as he had asked her to get it a week earlier. Saphiria advised Nero to try Lloyd's dish. Nero did it reluctantly because he felt a sense of responsibility. When he tasted Lloyd's beautifully cooked curry with perfectly cooked white rice, he experienced a hallucination of a distant, strange land. However, he found the curry unusual and decided it might be harmful to Iris's health. Lloyd led Iris and Tiruru to the end of the stream. Lloyd instructs Iris in water dragon magic, and she began by creating a small whirlpool in the river. However, Iris inadvertently created a much larger wave than intended, forcing Lloyd to use a water bullet to subdue it. Tiruru began to object to continuing to teach, but Lloyd reassured her that everything was still under control. He promised to stay with Iris until everything was all right. Lloyd tried to recall the first time he used the water dragon magic, but he didn't want Iris to face near-death danger. Nero and Saphiria saw them practicing near the river. After making sure that Iris was far away from the river, Nero told Saphiria to do it. Saphiria reluctantly attacked him, but she had no problem with Nero promising to cook curry for her. Saphiria uses the radish slash technique, unleashing a wave of energy containing vitamin C from radishes. Lloyd saw the waves coming toward him, and he responded by using the water dragon spell. However, he inadvertently caused the water to reverse, sweeping Nero and Safiria away. Lloyd used this incident as an example of how magic could be used to deal with floods. Nero asked Safiria to attack again, but she had already eaten all the turnips. When Tiruru saw them, she suspected they were doing something dangerous and foolish and told them to turn back to shore. Suddenly, a school of fish, a high-level monster flying up from the water. Lloyd immediately attacked it with Flame Arrow, but the fish just turned around and fought back. Lloyd knew that only an explosion could defeat them, but he worried about hurting Iris and the others. Iris helps by using an ice spear, freezing the water around them, but this also made her a target for the Legion fish. Tiruru rushed in and pushed Iris out of danger, but some Legion fish still attacked her. Nero and Safiria immediately began fighting to cross the water, but there are too many Legionnaires to handle. Ultimately, Lloyd used explosive magic to destroy the main body of the Legion fish, but the smaller fish remained alive. However, Tiruru is still in danger. When Iris saw her beloved servant about to be torn to pieces, this inspired her to use the water dragon spell to bring Tiruru to safety. Iris patiently controlled the flow of water. Meanwhile, Lloyd, Nero, and Safiria looked at her with admiration. Iris safely brought Tiruru back to shore, and her efforts left her exhausted. Everyone rushed to Tiruru's side, and luckily she wasn't injured. Lloyd was astonished to see that Iris was able to do that. Nero approached Lloyd and apologized for attacking him suddenly. As a way of apologizing, he gave Lloyd a plate of sashimi made from Legionnaire fish. Tiruru also thanked Lloyd for taking care of Iris. Nero rushed to embrace Iris, but she walked straight past him and hugged Lloyd instead. This scene embarrassed Nero, and Lloyd was launched into the air. Then he fell into the water. It seems Iris can also use explosive magic. Iris noted that Legionnaires are not a common species in Manurva. Lloyd reported that he recently encountered a sandworm and a griffin, both of which are high-ranking monsters. This cannot be just a coincidence. They wondered if the weakened power of the Holy Temple would allow monsters to infiltrate the area more easily. When Lloyd revealed that he had met Griffin at the Temple of Wind, Nero found that suspicious. Temples often possess the strongest concentrations of sacred energy. So if a powerful monster appears there, this means something very wrong is happening at the Temple of Wind. At the temple, they discovered a large tear in the sacred barrier. Some people gathered near the entrance gate to investigate. Lloyd reunited with Isolde and the others. Isolde revealed that they had been attacked by 3 griffons in quick succession, and she predicted another attack in the near future. Unfortunately, the saint is currently assigned to a different temple, 2 weeks away. Iris volunteered to enter the temple and perform a purification ritual. Tiruru explained that this would help restore the strength of the barrier. Tiruru asked Lloyd to escort Iris to the deepest part of the temple. She admitted that she was a burden, but she felt reassured in trusting Iris's safety to Lloyd. Safiria had more important things on her mind. She asked if there were any edible monsters nearby, and Lloyd told her about the me-bugs. Lloyd and Iris entered the Temple of Winds and began their descent. The upper levels of the temple contained dungeons, but the lower levels formed the main part of the temple. Nero warned them there might be monsters around. He approached Iris, sharing his doubts about Lloyd's strange dish. Safiria loudly declared that Nero's food tasted the same way. Iris had no concerns about Lloyd's food, and she defended his integrity. Lloyd quickly fired a lightning bolt at the skeletal crab monster lurking behind Nero. Safiria pulled out her instrument and asked if this was a monster. A beetle began crawling towards them. When Safiria realized it was an insect, she drew her sword, and she took it down with just one blow. Although Safiria has a passion for food, she was once a holy knight. Lloyd removed a piece of the beetle's leg and gave it to her, but its foul smell made her lose her appetite, and she collapsed. Nero decided to handle the problem himself. Nero took the beetle's leg from Lloyd's hand and make it a more palatable dish. This helped Safiria regain her strength, and she ran deeper into the temple to kill more monsters. Lloyd was very impressed with Nero's ability to prepare this dish. Lara contacted Lloyd and informed him that another horde of high-level monsters was attacking, and they couldn't hold out much longer. Iris urged everyone to quickly go inside. On the way to the sanctuary, Nero told Lloyd that he had enjoyed the meal Lloyd had prepared, but he won't acknowledge you until he knows what that curry is made of. However, their conversation about food was interrupted when they encountered a herd of minotaurs. Iris used magic to protect the group from falling rocks. This allows Safiria and Lloyd to attack. Nero used minotaur meat to grill a delicious steak. "You can't fight evil when you're hungry," he said, as they approached the purification room. Lloyd remarked that Iris was too focused on learning magic, so that she could fight alongside Safiria and Nero. However, Nero said that it wasn't that simple. Iris led everyone into the purification room, a large hall with a small platform in the center. She asked everyone to protect her as she began the ritual. Suddenly, Safiria ran to Iris's side and blocked several kunai knives aimed at her. A burst of laughter echoed through the room. A killer was sitting on a wooden beam. He claimed that she had received a large sum of money to kidnap Iris. She dodged Lloyd's spell, but she lost her balance when he destroyed her support. Black Crow fell, hit his head, and fainted. However, a series of kunai knives fell from above. Nero was injured while trying to protect Iris. They've only managed to kill one ninja, and now they have to fight the assassin along with hundreds of her clones. Meanwhile, Lyra and the others are trying to deal with a land eater that is destroying the outer part of the temple. The other adventurers wanted to retreat, but Isolde rallied them to hold their ground. They had to hold out until Lloyd and his team restored the shield. The assassin calls himself Black Crow, sent by the Roland government. Her other doppelgangers scolded her for revealing her identity so easily. Black Crow explained that she was only being polite. Lloyd examines Iris in the shield, but she's in trouble. All her strength is being used to prevent the hole from spreading further. She suspected that Black Crow possessed the Holy Staff of Destruction. Black Crow revealed that she did indeed possess the Holy Rod of Destruction, further infuriating her clones. The Holy Staff of Destruction is a powerful weapon that was used 200 years ago in the fight against evil spirits. The Kingdom of Roland should have kept it in its treasure vault, and as long as the staff remained within the area, the hole in the shield could not be closed. Black Crow revealed that this was a plot to lure Iris into a secluded area. Clones of Black Crow attack Iris, but Safiria quickly came to her mistress's defense. However, each clone of Black Crow is a top-tier assassin, and Nero's kitchen knife couldn't stop them for long. Lloyd countered with a block, and he let his teammates handle the attacking part. Safiria seized Nero and used him as a secondary weapon to inflict holy damage. When Black Crow witnessed Safiria's power, she had no choice but to use her trump card. A cloud of smoke enveloped the room. Separate Nero and Safiria from Lloyd and Iris. When the smoke cleared, Black Crow used his illusion technique. Future and past. When Safiria saw these images, she recalled her past as a holy knight and the wonderful pastries she used to eat. She began to daydream about eating food, while gnawing on the head of a Black Crow clone. In fact, even Black Crow's clone was affected by the hallucinations. But Safiria continued her attack. Black Crow intensified the hallucinogenic techniques, making it even harder for Safiria to escape its influence. However, this technique also began to affect Lloyd and Nero, weakening their defenses. Lloyd tried to find a way to break Black Crow's technique, but it seems he won't need to do that. Nero, still under the influence of hallucinations, continued to feed the Black Crow clone, disguised as Iris, more and more food, until she couldn't eat anymore. Eventually, the illusion shattered, and Black Crow was forced to retreat. They had never encountered such a deranged chef, one obsessed with feeding a girl. If Nero had been able to play, they would have been in serious trouble. Lloyd realized the way to save Safiria. He asked Nero to cook a dish. Hopefully, Nero's real food can help Safiria escape the Black Crow's illusion. Lloyd threw the necessary ingredients to Nero, and Nero used his level 99 fire-making and cooking skills to prepare Amuris in a short amount of time. The aroma of Nero's food wafted and reached Safiria's nose. This brought her back to consciousness. She swung her sword and destroyed the Holy Staff of Destruction. Safiria's gluttony saved the day, and the temple's protective layer began to slowly recover. Out there, Lara and Mars were preparing to face their final moments. She didn't care about the father. Suddenly, the earth monster's neck was tightened by the rapidly closing barrier, make it walk away as if nothing happened. Lloyd, Iris, Safiria, both Nero and the others turned their attention to the single remaining Black Crow. The remaining Black Crows are absorbed into the host body. It gave her immense power. Black Crow possessed superhuman speed, but no speed could compare to Lloyd's punch. He unleashed a punch powerful enough to defeat a high-level monster, and finally brought the crisis to an end. They took her outside, and Isolde planned to take her to the capital, where she would face trial for her crimes. Lloyd asks Black Crow why there is a bounty on Iris's head, and she revealed that the Prince of the Roland Kingdom wanted to get rid of Iris. Iris now understood everything. Prince Roland was planning to start a war. Iris asked Lloyd to accompany her to the capital to stop Roland's invasion plan. But that also means he'll have to face Ruby in that city. And Iris explained that the prince had long sought to conquer the southern kingdoms, to bolster our strength for a battle against evil spirits. She directly opposed the plan, which led to her expulsion from the Kingdom of Roland. Iris wanted Melsaria to forge an alliance with neighboring countries to prevent the invasion, and Isolde promised to arrange a meeting with the queen. Meanwhile, Lloyd was worried about the possibility of seeing Ruby again. Finally, they reached the capital of Melsaria. Isolde and Iris were amazed by the luxury and splendor of this great city. Isolde introduced them to the queen, who was in her radiant beauty. Iris tells the queen about Roland's impending invasion and her status as a former saint. This caused a stir among the queen's courtiers. The commotion intensified when they realized Lloyd was with Iris. Lloyd's remains famous for its 40% collect rate. When Iris explained that Lloyd had defeated Black Crow, the officials pointed and laughed at him. They didn't believe he could defeat such a skilled assassin. Iris and Isolde were angry at the way Lloyd was treated. The queen ordered silence in the room. If Lloyd had truly defeated Black Crow, she wanted to witness his power. However, she insisted that Lloyd wear a Hawaiian shirt and present himself elegantly to Dandelion at the 100 Flowers Ball. As expected, Iris was also forced to participate. Safiria and Isolde also had to participate, and they were forced to wear equally ridiculous costumes. Isolde did his best to keep Lloyd's spirits high when she ordered Safiria to use Gemini Blade. However, Safiria misheard it as jam and bread. Dandelion seized the opportunity to defeat both of them, leaving Lloyd and Iris as the only two remaining fighters. Lloyd's spirits were low. Iris encouraged him to get up and prove to everyone that he was the hero who had saved Manurva. Finally, Lloyd regains his powers and joins Iris in attacking Dandelion. Meanwhile, Ruby heard noises coming from the next room, but she didn't pay any more attention. She spoke with her esteemed guest Crowley, a leading wizard of the magical society. Crowley is a legend, one of the heroes who defeated the Dark Lord 200 years ago, and from then on lived a relatively quiet life in the countryside. Ruby hoped to convince Crowley to work for her, thereby enhancing her own reputation. However, she accidentally tripped over a bottle. He spilled tea all over Crowley. Crowley uses the protective charm so naturally, as if it were part of his breathing. Crowley tasted some of the tea and complained that it was terrible. He also discovered a small amount of gunpowder in it, and Ruby explained that she wanted to add a little spicy kick to the tea. Crowley wanted to get to work immediately, and Ruby gave him a list of the ingredients she needed, which included fleured einzel, a type of fan-shaped flower that blooms only in the unexplored areas of Zone 0. Ruby asked him to collect it tomorrow, but in reality, Crowley needed at least a week. Ruby allowed him to use the shift ring that Lloyd had designed, but this was the first time Crowley had seen one like it. Crowley sensed that Ruby was underestimating the danger posed by Area 0. This is an extremely dangerous place, where 1,000 knights could die in a single night. Red found it hard to believe, because Lloyd, whom she believed to be a third-rate mage with fourth-rate magic, had been able to gather the materials from there without much difficulty. Crowley replied that if Lloyd was really as Ruby described him, he must be a very powerful Chronicle-level mage. Ruby couldn't believe it. He remarked that Ruby could one day become an alchemist on par with Lloyd. Ruby refused to believe it. If Lloyd could gather the materials for her but Crowley couldn't, then, in her opinion, Crowley was a fraud. Ruby shrieked that Crowley was useless and that he and his teammates were just lucky to be facing the Demon King monster. Crowley was a patient man, but he wouldn't tolerate being insulted about his teammates. Ruby sensed a fiery aura emanating from him, but she remained resolute and refused to retract her words. She would rather die on this hilltop. Crowley opened his mouth to say something, but suddenly he exploded. Ruby realizes her snacks contain explosives. This caused this. Royal guards rushed into the room to investigate the explosion. Meanwhile, in the kingdom of St. Roland, the king received news that Black Crow had been defeated, even though she carried the holy scepter of destruction. Prince Geese commented that Iris was merely delaying the inevitable. He firmly believed that a forceful takeover of the western continent was the only path to peace. The queen was very pleased and delighted with Lloyd's victory. She also liked the Hawaiian shirt he was wearing. She now believed Iris's story and promised to hold a meeting to discuss the next steps. Iris told the queen that the incident at the Temple of the Winds was merely a minor provocation, and she asked her not to deploy the army. The queen appreciated that Iris still cared about the common people, and she agreed to implement some trade restrictions, including an embargo on goods. However, the queen reminded them that things would not change until Prince Geese was dealt with. Isolde took Lloyd and the others to her family's holiday home for the time being. Tiruru requested some time off, and Nero and Safiria both agreed. Iris also granted Tiruru leave. Tiruru entrusted Iris to Lloyd's care. Isolde suggested they go sightseeing while she visited the Explorers Guild. While out for a walk, Lloyd made the puzzling decision to ask about Prince Geese. Iris answered his question without hesitation. She explained that Geese wasn't a scary person, but he seemed desperate to find peace at all costs. Geese was convinced that if he could conquer the pagan nations on the continent, they would be able to unite against the monster. When Iris opposed his ideals, Geese exclaimed that if her divine power were sufficient to maintain the barriers, he wouldn't have had to go this far. Lloyd apologized for touching on such an important topic. Suddenly, a child ran past them. This drew their attention to a tourist fair right in front of them. Iris saw a roller coaster, which seemed to be a perfectly normal sight in medieval kingdoms. Lloyd and Iris decided to try the roller coaster, but Iris felt nothing special about it. She felt uninspired because she faced life-threatening situations almost daily. Lloyd was curious to know how this roller coaster moved. He looked down and discovered that Dandelion was operating the entire journey by himself. He enjoys physical activity and can make children happy. Dandelion is truly a kind person, a genuine green flag. When a child recognized Lloyd, they immediately called him a useless wizard. Dandelion then picked the baby up and said that Lloyd was stronger than him. Dandelion wiped the sweat from his brow and told Lloyd and Iris to enjoy the rest of their date. Lloyd and Iris decided to return to Isolde's holiday home. On the way, Lloyd asked Isolde what she planned to do if they managed to prevent a war. Iris took this opportunity to tell more about herself. When she was a child, the bishop sent her to an educational institution to be a candidate for the Sing test. Becoming a Sing test candidate is a huge responsibility, so candidates are taught many subjects to prepare for this task. Iris worked very hard to reach her current position because she wanted to protect everyone. Her mother was a fruit and vegetable vendor. Her brothers worked hard in the fields. Her father, a knight, regularly inspected her at the academy. Because of a conflict with the prince, she was banished from the kingdom. But her friends still followed her. She found it very difficult to become a saint again. However, Iris also wanted to continue living with the people she loved. She couldn't bear the thought of living alone. Lloyd felt that the argument with Ruby now seemed insignificant. He promised to do everything he could to make her happy. When they returned to the vacation home, they discovered that Nero and the others had prepared a celebratory feast for Iris in a short time. Safiria began to eat up all the dishes that everyone had worked so hard to prepare. Iris patted Lloyd on the shoulder and said that when everything was settled, she wanted to organize a celebration with everyone like this, to start anew in a fresh way for all of them. Meanwhile, Ruby was arrested for assaulting Crowley. Rumors began to spread that she was too desperate to improve her ranking. This led her to pressure Crowley into working with her. Ruby was furious about the outcome. She heard loud shouting coming from a nearby cell. It turned out Black Crow was imprisoned right next to her. She realized that Ruby was the most famous alchemist in the kingdom, and Black Crow asked her if she would like to come and work for the kingdom of Roland. However, other members of the Black Crow opposed bringing an outsider into their kingdom. They also argued that they could not escape from their cells. Black Crow reassured his clones that they could actually escape from their cells. Black Crow entered Ruby's cell and Ruby told them about the teleportation circle in her room. She was completely intent on pretending that she was being held captive by them. She hoped this would prove the accusations against her to be unfounded rumors. Prison guards rushed to the scene, but upon arrival, they found that the suspects had escaped. The next morning, Lloyd and Nero were asked to appear in the reception room. They didn't know what was happening, but they had a feeling that nothing good was going to happen. When they entered the room, Iris, Isolde, and the Queen were already seated. The atmosphere was tense, and the Queen reported that an important figure in the royal capital had narrowly escaped assassination, with one suspect seen escaping with Black Crow. Their border garrisons were also attacked. Roland's invasion of Melseria has begun. Worse still, Lloyd's curry pot is now burnt black, and he faces an extremely awkward situation.